It is the Blue Room. It is happy times here on the Everton front. The Blues swatting aside Arsenal on Saturday like it's nobody's business. And they're going to go and do the same to the Reds on Monday as well, aren't they? We've all got that pep in our step. Mick Greenall's here with me. He's got his ticket for Anfield on Monday to see us turn over the Reds for the first time at Anfield in front of a crowd since 1999. Haven't you, mate? Feeling pumped for that one?
Well, yeah, I literally just said I'm actually feeling optimistic for it going into that game. That's what Sean Dyche does to us.
Absolutely. And I know our next guest, Paddy Boyland, is very excited because he actually messaged me this week. So you usually when I message people probably don't know how this works. When I message people to come on the podcast, I kind of have an inherent percentage in my head what chance it's going to be they're going to say yeah. So Mick, I'd put you at like a solid 80% of the time. You say yeah, I'll come on. Paddy, I probably put down at like a 25% chance. Usually I get a message back saying about how busy he is and how much Everton are doing his head in, and he doesn't want to do much more Everton chat anymore. But this week, listeners, Paddy messaged me and said, "Are there any podcasts going this week?" So I'm assuming you're really excited to talk about Everton, mate.
I feel like you've turned me into some kind of major diva here, the way I'm talking about.
Hey, that is pretty much exactly what happens. So if you think that sounds like a diva, then draw your own conclusion.
I recognise about half of what you said there. I recognise that Everton are doing my head in bit. I'm not entirely sure that I'm really busy. I'm having a moan about that. I don't know if I go down that route. But I was just wondering whether your intro talking about how Everton are going to turn over the Reds on Monday, I was just wondering how that's going to go down after Liverpool 3, Everton 0, because I'm sure that'll get clipped up on some kind of Liverpool channel or podcast, and we'll be reminded of it for ages to come.
I think I'm going to become a meme.
You could be
confident about Everton,
like the bald Irish guy that does the YouTube shows for Liverpool. You might become the Everton version of it.
I mean, that's harsh. Come on.
obviously, there's a big difference in the amount of hair you both have.
Well, I mean, we've all made bad predictions. I mean, what's your worst ever football shout? I mean, mine was saying that I think Eric Lamela could be a Ballon d'Or contender in the future when he moves to Tottenham.
Mine was thinking Sandro would be good.
Oh, and I was literally going to say that then as well. Do you remember when they put out the training video? I don't know if they were in Austria or somewhere like that. And honestly, some of the finishes that were coming out of his feet, bloody hell. And he was crap.
Moise Keane did the same, didn't he? Like in training, looked amazing. They put that video. It's like, what have we signed here? But alas, it didn't work. But listen, we've got Dwight McNeil and James Tarkowski these days. So who needs them anyway? We are going to talk about the Merseyside derby later, of course. We'll also have a chat about the recruitment and scouting restructure that's been going on this week, which sort of came to light based on people trolling for Everton's LinkedIn, which I thought was quite interesting as well. But of course, we'll start off with Arsenal. Paddy, amazing day. And remarkably, Sean Dyche becomes, I think it's the 15th Everton manager in succession to not lose the first game in charge. So, I mean, should we just sack him now, get ahead of this and get somebody else in for the derby so we don't lose that as well?
Well, 38 different managers over the course of a season.
How many games have we got left? 18. I mean, would you put it past Farhad Moshiri to do that?
I don't know. I'd love to see the short list as like candidates come and go. I'd love to see where we get to.
Well, I'm sure you could bring people back for like a second or third go, like happened with Howard Kendall.
Could you just imagine Ronald Koeman coming back like 2 games before the end of the season, just kind of igniting kind of absolute fume? Because I don't think anybody likes Ronald Koeman, do they?
No, he's been chatting away against there, hasn't he? But no, Saturday was boss, wasn't it?
Do you reckon that quote is legit?
Well, apparently there's one made up yesterday from Ruud van Nistelrooy talking about Cody Gakpo that was just plucked out of thin air.
Yeah, I think like what tends to happen is that these accounts, these aggregators and these accumulators on Twitter, they tend to see something, whether it's true or not, and don't check. So obviously that reduces the success rate, and then it just blows up. So I saw loads of people talking about this from accounts I'd never even seen before. These quotes, it does sound like Ronald Koeman. So whoever's made it up, it does sound like him. Kind of like, wasn't there a suggestion? He said something along the lines of Everton have won 1 championship. It just struck me as something that was just there to kind of add a bit of needle. But who knows? Maybe Ronald did actually say it.
But yeah, Saturday, absolutely boss, wasn't it?
Yeah, fantastic day. Just one of those days where you come away with kind of a renewed sense of optimism and vigor about the club as a whole, and kind of we've been through this period of turbulence, and obviously there could still be turbulence on the way. There's still some division, but there's nothing better than even just temporarily changing the agenda and focusing minds than 3 points on a Saturday. And the thing I loved about it was just, it was clear there was a game plan, and it was clear there was a game plan from the outset. It was really well coached. It was really well executed. Players who have been hideously out of form so far this season, even last season, came back renewed and revitalised. So there I'm thinking about Dwight McNeil, Abdoulaye Doucouré. I think that's the sign of a good coach. I think that's the sign of a good manager. Somebody who can come in and go, I can see how Abdoulaye Doucouré can fit into this Everton midfield. I can see how Dwight McNeil can function in my Everton side. And then all the things we'd spoken about in the week and the build-up, kind of protecting the V defensively, congesting the midfield, the crosses to the back post, and Dyche's success at doing that. It all kind of came to fruition in front of our eyes on the pitch. So not only did Everton beat Arsenal, but they deservedly beat Arsenal as well. I don't think there was any question over that. By half-time, they had comfortably the better chances. By full-time, they'd also had comfortably the better chances. And my fear at half-time had been they were working so hard and they were given so much that I thought by 75 they'd be spent, and there wouldn't be enough quality on the bench to kind of pull them through for the rest of the game. But they continued where they left off after the break. They picked it up and fully deserved the win, created the better chances. So it's been quite funny to see some of the fallout in the aftermath, the talk of anti-football and everything else. I just think it was a well-executed game plan by a manager who clearly knew what he was doing on the day. And let's hope he's got 7, 8, 10 more of those in his locker between now and the end of the season, because if he has, Everton will be fine.
Yeah, 100%. And Mick, that was the thing for me, and Paddy talked about things like protecting the V there, which you've done this week on Twitter, spoken about, and there's the clip you've done's gone viral. We've all listened to probably the interviews Dyche has done, and people like yourself have looked very in depth tactically at what he's done. Were you surprised at how quickly it all came together in that sense on Saturday, because he didn't have that long to work with the players? And I remember speaking to Natalie Bromley about Dyche beforehand, that she said it's not a case of basic football with basic setups and doing things very simple that you might sort of associate with this type of manager. He has got a lot of little intricacies into the way in which he sets teams up, and it felt like it all came together very, very surprisingly quickly on Saturday.
Yeah, I think there's been first of all, I think in terms of the match itself, it's probably the most impressed I've come away from a home game in a very long time, probably since the first games under Ancelotti before COVID, in terms of being just generally impressed and pleased with the performance rather than just the actual results. But I think in terms of the reaction, from people maybe outside of Everton who kind of look at Dyche and referring to what you mentioned there, and that what he does is based off hard work and lots of running and fighting for the shirt and determination. But I think that oversimplifies it too much, and that if it was just as easy as going into that game of sitting in a certain type of structure and chasing the balls down and winning your duels and that type of stuff, more than one team would have beaten Arsenal before we played them on Saturday. I think it was only Manchester United, and even that I think might have been the end of August, beginning of September time at the start of the season. And I think even from some of the tactical nuances throughout the game as well, there was quite obviously the most interesting thing before the game had started was that it looked like it was going to be a 4-5-1 and not a 4-4-2, and the way in which we pressed, and which it was on one side it was Doucouré who'd make it a 4-4-2, and then it was on the left it was Onana, and quite ironically I think that's something Lampard had tried to achieve with Iwobi in the middle, and that he'd have Garner as the 6, which I'm still not sure about that in the long term. And I think there's actually a clip of Dyche and his staff with about 10-15 minutes to go absolutely losing the plot, trying to get someone to just stay where they are. And I can almost guarantee that that's a Dyche. And so I'm not sure about that, in the long term. But that type of it can't be underestimated how difficult it is to try and get a pressing structure to work in such short time against an Arsenal team who, I remember, in the first opening 5 or 10 minutes just before we scored in the second half, they came out and you knew they'd be a lot more rejuvenated. And, I think Arteta wasn't going to watch that opening 45 minutes and not change anything or tweak anything. And the way they move the ball, how quick they move the ball to get it into the final third can be mesmerising. And a lot of the triangles, a lot of the movements and the third man runs, they make it so hard to play against. And yet the way we pressed initially and the way we got in the structures, into the low block and mid block, when they broke through was really impressive. And I don't think it's a simple case of this being, a new manager bounce or just, people working that little bit harder because or new managers can come in or because the atmosphere was good. I think it was just a really, like Paddy said, a really well executed game plan.
Yeah, 100%. And, the main man on the day, Paddy, of course, Tarkowski scores the winner, McNeil plays well, the core rejuvenated, etc., etc. But yeah, it's all about Amadou Onana for me. And, sort of said this a little bit at the weekend, but I think it's really fascinating and probably a testament to him that probably over the last few weeks when Everton have been at the worst, he's probably been at his best. You think about the game at Old Trafford when we played Southampton at home. They were matches in which he was really trying to drive the team forward in both of those games. And listen, on Saturday, he just absolutely loved it, didn't he? And while, people in the stands were panicking and getting behind the team, and it was getting a little bit nervy and edgy towards the end, there he was running the ball 40 yards down the touchline and celebrating winning tackles. It was just a midfield display that had absolutely everything from him.
Yeah, just about everything, like you say. I love that run in the first half down the left wing where he cuts the ball back for Calvert-Lewin. Still not entirely sure whether it's him being imprecise with the final ball or Calvert-Lewin not getting there when he should. Still not completely made my mind up over that. But that's where you see when he makes that run from deep, how effective he can be. I think Lampard got completely lost with him, particularly in the early part of this season, where he kind of saw some of these elements, but positioned him really high up the pitch. And I think you lose that element that we saw in the first half there and at other times in the second half, where he's just so good, kind of springing from deep and making that run and putting the opposition under pressure. It was a really good all-round performance. I've still got that little bit of terror inside me when he picks the ball up, normally with his back to goal, close to Everton's box. I mean, he did really well. And it was a lovely flick to, I think it was get past Partey. But I remember when he was doing that, I was thinking, if you lose the ball here, Everton are absolutely screwed. So I've still got that in me with him. But more often than not, to his credit, he's keeping the ball in those situations. I think that this was a game plan that suited him much better than the early ones under Frank Lampard. It showcased his strengths. I think he himself, at a very young age, and I know one of the things that appealed to Everton about him was that he'd always shown leadership with the Belgium under-21s and with Lille. Throughout his career, he'd been seen as a leader, as somebody that kind of held court in a dressing room and was always influential. I think there's something about him in what you're saying there, where kind of all the really key games for Everton in recent months, Southampton and this one, and a few of the others, he's stepped up quite considerably in his level and is now starting to adapt and show just how talented he is and can become. Obviously loves mixing it with Goodison and kind of giving it to the fans and getting it back. During the kind of really glum moments, he'd try and rouse the crowd, and the crowd just wouldn't respond. I remember just looking at it, slightly cringe, watching him try and G everybody up. And he was himself, he was kind of up for it, but like there was just a flatness about Goodison in those kind of final days under Lampard that I think was hard to shake. He's doing everything he can to kind of get the club out of it. It kind of feels like he's a new talisman, and in a different way to Richarlison, admittedly, but a new talisman. And I think there's an awful lot of upside with him here. It made me laugh after the game. I would have given man of the match to Onana, and actually I'm not even sure it was that close. when you look at the rest of the Everton performances, even though there were some good ones. Very funny. First thing, Dyche was asked about him after the game, and his first thing is, oh, he's talented, but he's got lots to work on. I want him to learn the ugly side of his game, and he was kind of telling us in the post-match presser about how he's going to put him on the phone to Stephen Defoe in the week to get him talking about the ugly side of the game. And then I think it was something funny that made me laugh about how if Stephen doesn't get through to him, then I will, kind of thing. It's like kind of vaguely threatening, but also quite funny from Dyche. And I remember thinking about it and thinking, like, Onana joined off the strength of kind of working with Lampard, and that was a big draw for him. That can't be underestimated. But there's probably something, he does probably need like a Dyche figure to almost say, well, this is when you go and this is when you stay. Sometimes the positioning and the instinct is a little bit wrong. And I think somebody like Sean Dyche will hopefully bring that out of him. So though he was fantastic, really good. And it's quite clear that Everton have got a gem on their hands if he continues down this path. If he's used correctly, I think he can go on to really big things.
Yeah, I absolutely love him. And it's one of them where I think I've probably been on the show a few times this season, Mick saying that he should play as a number 6, and I think he's best as a number 6. But then you see things like what Paddy mentioned there, where he just gets the ball and just breezes past Erdegaard like he's it doesn't even look like he's running a full pelt there, does it? He's just got this like enormous gait where he can just like sort of stride away from players, and what he did in the second half, carrying the ball forward as well, and how good he is on the ball. And I think, well, maybe he's a number 8. I mean, I suppose we don't need to put him in a box yet, but the fact that we're sort of looking at him and going, well, this is a lad who can do a couple of different things on a pitch and be asked to do a couple of different roles at 21 years old, that's really encouraging, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I put a visual up yesterday on Twitter, and when I was doing that, I went through when he'd been playing, the amount of games he started and completed at top flight level in Germany, France, and now over in the Premier League. And this is the player who hasn't even played full 50-90 minutes yet. I think that can go, because 21s doesn't seem that young anymore really in football. Usually when players break through, you're talking 18-19. So, and especially the amount of clubs that he's played for and what we pay for him in the summer, he's nowhere near the finished article. And I think at some point that there will have to be a discussion about what's the where do we pin him down. And I do think it will probably be deeper, because I think really his future is probably obviously not at Everton. I think is more or less at the very top, for one of the top 4 teams in the Premier League, if not going off to somewhere like Paris Saint-Germain. And in those type of teams, he'll be used as the main defensive player. And I think Paddy's right in that, Dyche is probably more so than Lampard is going to be someone who's a little bit more assertive in what he wants from his certain positions. And I think you could see that was probably a big deficiency under Lampard. He was a little bit too vague in what certain player profiles were, whereas with Dyche, I think this will help certain players who maybe aren't as good as Onana, who obviously can fluctuate between certain roles. When you've got someone like Decore or Idrissa Gueye, when they know exactly where they need to be or what to do, trying to simplify it in those methods, in those ways, will be far more beneficial.
I think we saw that as well with some of the other players. So I don't think Dwight McNeil's become a bad player overnight. I don't think Abdoulaye Doucouré became a bad player overnight. I think if you play Abdoulaye Doucouré in a certain role where you're asking him to take the ball and dictate, he's not going to do it very well. And likewise, if you want Dwight McNeil to be this kind of bustling, dynamic presence that is coming in off the right all the time and arrowing them into the top corner, then you're probably going to be disappointed with him too. But if you go back and you focus on kind of what makes those players good, and there's been a lot of talk from Dyche about kind of maximising individuals, maximising the collective, and looking at these guys and saying, well, Doucouré's got loads of energy, he's got an abundance of energy, but he breaks really well from midfield. Like his best spell at Everton was arguably that first month or two before he got injured under Rafa, where he was given that licence to just make those late runs into the box and to join the attack. I think he did it really well. His injury at the time was obviously a massive blow. Likewise, Dwight McNeil, he's not going to burst past a man all the time, but there's quality in his left boot. He delivers a really good ball. There's quality in his left boot. If Everton can keep Dominic Calvert-Lewin fit, somebody like McNeil's going to be key in bringing out the most in him. because he's one of the few I look at and think he can deliver a ball semi-regularly or better. You're not getting much from the fullbacks, whichever fullbacks play. So a lot rides on McNeil, Townsend when he's fit, James Garner when he's back, some of those wingers to supply Calvert-Lewin. So we saw big differences in both of those two players. No surprise to me that there was kind of a clarity about their roles that maximised what they could do and helped them perform really well. So that's what we've got to hope for with Dyche now. We ended the window weaker in terms of personnel on the pitch, but stronger in the managerial ranks and in the dugout. I think what we're banking on now is that Sean Dyche can take this collective that was underperforming and can kind of drag them by the coattails and turn them into even a lower mid-table team. Would be music to probably our ears at the moment.
Yeah.
Even just doing that, just a functioning football team that doesn't look flawed in every single way.
Yeah. I mean, McNeil's such a weird player. There's like, I can't remember like losing the plot at the match as much at a player in my life. But then, like, when he plays on the right, I just think he's absolutely terrible. And then you put him on the left-hand side at the weekend and just tell him to run down the line and cross the ball into the box, and he's absolutely fine. Like, I'd never want him see him playing on the right again. Like, it just doesn't suit him. And whenever he cuts inside, he just clumsy, loses the ball. But if you just say to him, get on the left, run forward, get your head down and get crosses in, and then take the corner when it's blocked, he can do something. He can do a bit of a job. So, in my opinion anyway. But yeah, the first 20 minutes on Saturday, I mean, yeah, I'm not even going to go there because it's going to make me angry again. But then when he swapped over to the left, I was buzzing with him. Final bit of analysis from the game on Saturday. Did we all enjoy the fight at the end? I thought it was absolutely boss. That 1 minute where those two balls on the pitch, I think a ball boy pushed Zinchenko over, and then Mope sort of like power slammed him a little bit. And then everybody ran over Mick, all 22 players rather on the pitch, just converging in that one little space. It was sort of at that moment where I thought, yeah, we probably got this now. These are starting to lose their heads a little bit.
Yeah, that's exactly what Mope was brought on for, and I think that's probably what a lot of people expecting from him a lot more when we signed him. That type of nasty streak that he's seemingly not been able to be able to get anything out of it since he signed. But yeah, I think to be honest, when that happened, that was all I could think of was, if this referee starts adding more and more time on to the additional time. But yeah, I think at that point it was, I think we were kind of convinced, not fully convinced, but kind of convinced that we got the 3 points.
Yeah, Zinchenko's like usually the calmest fellow in the world as well, isn't he, Paddy? And like he was absolutely losing the plot. You're on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, it's a slick recording operation here, as you can tell. Get me through to the weekend, I suppose. Yeah, that's what I liked about it most, was that Everton had riled Arsenal so much that the guy that's calmness personified 99.9% of the time lost his shit in that moment at Goodison. Largely because of Neil Mope, I think. Maybe partly to do with the ball boy, but Neil Mope just being an irritant and just kind of picking at heels and doing everything there. So, yeah, I thought that was, like you say, that was probably the moment when you realised Arsenal had gone past the point of return. They weren't coming back. I mean, from where I was, so I'm in the press box, which I've obviously main stand, so I didn't have the best view of what was happening over the other side. My immediate reaction when I saw the kerfuffle was that something like big must have happened, like a punch is being thrown and it's going to result in 2 or 3 sendings off. And then I turned around to the TV monitor just to my right at the edge of the press box, and looked at it again and just thought, nothing's happening. Mope like initiates the contact, trying to like pull him, and then just flops on the floor for seemingly no reason other than to annoy people. His cameo was interesting. Like, he's kind of using him in a similar role to Calvert-Lewin, and I just don't think he's able to do that. I think what I'd envisaged of him and from him when Dyche came in was, if Dyche played a 4-4-2 at times, Mope had been a slightly more withdrawn one that almost sat in Dyche terms in front of north of the number 6 and just kind of disrupts. That's a problem with Everton's squad, I suppose, and like even Ellis Sims can't really do what Calvert-Lewin does, and certainly not as effectively as Dom manages to do most of the time. So
that was the best Dom's played for ages, I think, on Saturday, wasn't it? Like
good.
all round, yeah.
It was good, and obviously he hadn't been 100% in the build-up. Maybe he never is 100% these days in the build-up and in games. There was one moment in the first half where I think McNeil had a shot blocked and Calvert-Lewin went in with the keeper, and I was hoping he was actually going to properly go for it, and it felt to me as though he kind of backed out a little bit of the challenge of the 50-50, needed to be stronger. But on the whole, kind of his link-up play was really good. I thought he occupied the two defenders, two very, very good defenders at that, for the 60-odd minutes he was on the pitch. Because of that, it was so noticeable when he went off. It was so noticeable, and that's what Everton's going to have to manage. I think a lot rests on how many games he plays between now and the end of the season, and if he's not playing games, how effectively Dyche can kind of rejig the game plan to make Everton equally as effective.
Yeah, it was just like when Dom was on, even when he wasn't winning headers, he was making them skew headers like into awkward places, and we could like push up and win second balls. But when Mope was on, it was just like little cushioned headers out to the fullback, and we just like had to get back into our shape straight away and defend. So there's no outlet. But listen, everything else was absolutely fantastic at the weekend. Moving on to something a little bit different, lads. Today has been confirmed that Everton have made a couple of new appointments. This is obviously after Dan Paddy has moved up to become head of recruitment, the long vacant head of recruitment that we spoke about for a while at Everton. But they made two appointments that have been confirmed. One is Lee Sargison, who's joined as head of scouting. He was at Brighton beforehand, which I know has got a lot of people excited. And the second, and I'm probably going to butcher this pronunciation, but it's Dan Michichi. Is that right? Does anyone know?
I don't know. I'm glad you pronounced it, not me.
Let's go with that anyway. And he's taken the role of player development lead coach. So these are part of Kevin Felwell's revamp plan. Mick, I'll come to you first on this, mate. I mean, first and foremost, we finally got a head of recruitment. Hallelujah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been in the pipeline, I suppose, for a while. It's going to be Dan Paddy. We were having a little chat about it just before we came on, and it's such a weird one, in it, because I don't. It's hard to be critical of anyone, really. I think in the recruitment structure that already exists, simply because, I mean, even the title that he now has, ironically, head of recruitment. Can you even be, are any of us convinced that he's actually going to be in charge of that department to the extensive he would be if he was at Brighton or somewhere like that? And I think that's the issue, really, in that you can't, despite the fact that he's been at the club, I think, quite a few years. The fact that you can't actually judge him says a lot about what the recruitment structure itself. I think obviously a lot's been said about the way Everton's run behind the scenes. I think obviously there was the Farhad Moshiri interview a couple of weeks ago, and how he almost described what seemed an absolute absurd process of how players are signed. Now it's got to be signed off by about every single member of staff of the football club. It's a really difficult one. To be honest, I think it was an opportunity missed in that. I think in that type of role, if it is used correctly, I suppose, I thought it was a chance for Kevin Felwell and his people, supposed to bring in fresh ideas to the football club. Paddy might be really good at what he does, and I suppose we might not find out. We might find out. Who knows? But I think it was an opportunity to bring in someone with a track record of working on a really smart football club, probably a bit similar to the head of scouting appointment with the lad from Brighton, who I think ironically has taken Dan Paddy's previous role. I think it might be. But listen, I think that appointment anyway is good, simply because I think he was at Brighton from more or less when things started to change under Chris Hughton before they appointed Graham Potter, and when their recruitment started to transform a little bit in the Premier League. And then on the new academy coach as well, who I'm not going to try and pronounce. I know he's had a bit of a poor time of it, coaching in the first team, but I know he's very high rated as an academy coach, working at MK Dons and Arsenal before. I know he's very, very good at what he does. I know he's very highly rated on Football Manager as well. So
I've got to go and check that after this. Yeah, try and get him in on me Everton save. But yeah, Paddy, you wrote the piece on it for the Athletic today. This is like, I suppose, like Mick said, we don't really know how significant it's going to be because we don't really know who gets involved and who has that kind of influence at Everton. But Kevin Fowler's copped a lot of stick, hasn't he, for the transfer window, and we sort of jokingly said on one of the podcasts last week that he had a month off, but it does sort of seem like he's really intent on reshaping things behind the scenes. At least the intent seems to be in the right place.
I'd love to see Kevin Thelwell's reaction if somebody put that to him that he'd had a month off, because I think he's about the busiest man in football. Given that he hasn't really had a full complement of recruitment people under him. Certainly over the summer, when there was less meddling from the hierarchy, particularly Mashiri and his mates in London, Thelwell was kind of trying to do about 7 or 8 different things all at once, with recruitment being one of them, only part of his remit. I think the most important thing probably to add to what you've said so far is that, I think we wrote in December that Paddy was in line for a senior role and was in line for this promotion. I believe it took effect early in the new year. So we shouldn't judge this as an after January transfer thing and a response to the January transfer window. It was something that has been in the pipeline for a good while. It gets us back to where we were in December 2021 in terms of personnel, when Greta Steinson, the head of recruitment, Marcel Brands, the director of football, and Paddy himself left. Paddy was kind of third in command there, behind those other two that I mentioned. And in the rest of that period, in the intervening period between then and now, Everton haven't had a head of recruitment. Paddy's kind of done a bit of both, and Thelwell's done director of football with a bit of recruitment. So we're back to where we were under Brands. I suppose that's a message for how much division and how much damage Benitez did in his short tenure. But it's a sign of progress behind the scenes in terms of Everton structures. So given what we've said, and given that Paddy was in effect head of recruitment during January, you can see that that's not going to fix everything all by itself. I kind of make the joke that after every transfer window, I write a piece along the same lines as the one before, maybe with the exception of the summer, but definitely with January. And the diagnosis and the outcomes or conclusions are always the same. It's always, there is some good work taking place. Some of the right players are being identified. And yet when we get higher up that chain, something falls down, whether it's interference, whether it's a lack of money, it might be anything. Something falls down. The two big takeaways, I've not spoken to you kind of on a podcast, Matt. Obviously, we've had chats in private about the window. But two of the things that I just think really worked against the recruitment structures and the recruitment guys in January, getting rid of Lampard so late while you've got a deal for Danjuma lined up. I think probably you sack him in November before the World Cup, or soldier on until the end of the window when you've got your players in place. Sacking them so late creates confusion in the market, makes it harder to sign players. So I think that was one big error, one big fatal error. And then the other one was in selling Anthony Gordon on, I think it was the 28th of January, with just days of the window left, leaving every other club on the planet fully aware that Everton had just banked 40 million up front from Newcastle for him. Again, if you're going to sell Anthony Gordon, make it clear in December, get all your ducks in order, and then I don't care who it is. I think they obviously, it's been well documented by ourselves and others that they wanted a Langer during that window, and actually came very close to getting them through the door, I believe. But almost have those players lined up at the price you want them for, rather than what kind of the inflated price that other clubs kind of pitch them to when Gordon's being sold. So that there are still issues here in the process. I'm not necessarily sure, well, we don't know for sure whether everything's entirely smooth below board level and below owner level. I would love to be able to see just how good these people are at their jobs. But so much else goes on at the football club that it's hard sometimes to decide, isn't it? And is it a case of Marcel Brands being bad at his job, Kevin Thelwell being bad at his job, Dan Purdy being bad at his job, Steve Walsh before him? Or is it something more endemic? Is it something more kind of deep-rooted inside the football club? Well, I mean, my pieces tend to go with the latter kind of conclusion, and a lot of what I do. But let's see. I think it's obviously a positive step. I like the step of bringing in Michiche, I'm going to go with, which makes him sound like a Peruvian winger. He's just been brought in, just been recruited, 17-year-old, promising 17-year-old like Brighton have just signed.
My head just, when I said it initially, my head just went to, remember Mikali, who played for Juventus?
Michael,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to do some research on that because I'm not happy with the pronunciation of this. But I think Mick touched on something interesting in that he had a spell as manager with MK Dons, which went badly, and he obviously was cleared out at Crawley. He was assistant manager there to Kevin Betsy. But number twos don't always make good number ones, and over the last day or so, I've asked people in the game, what do you make of him? And what comes back is really good as a developer of talent, really good as an innovator. He's seen as an innovator within the field, quite dramatically so, I'd say, from some of what's come back. So he's not a conventional figure. I think he will hopefully challenge some of the processes in place at Everton and the way Everton do things. And that's also kind of filling the gap left by Greta Steinson too, because Greta Steinson's official title was head of recruitment and development. And what Everton have done is separate them. I believe the separation is the best thing, but they've separated them off. And now you've got a situation where somebody with a really good CV, Arsenal and managerial experience and work with England, various other clubs, Dele Alli played a key part in bringing good Dele Alli through at MK Dons rather than lazy, slovenly Dele Alli that we see now. Kind of bereft Dele Alli. So I think that's something that they've needed for a while. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes. And what I loved about the job specification was that it's focused on the players at the club between 17 and 21. There's also a focus on loans and again, kind of making sure that they're doing the right thing by the loan players, who can go out, who's already out. So potentially important for an Ellis Sims or a Jared Branthwaite or a Lewis Dobbin. Everton have to be better at that because as we know, they've not got enough through. I think it's kind of a central pillar of Thelwell's vision to make sure that Everton produce more for the first team, that they're more sustainable in their transfers. And if they're spending big money, then you do it on an Amadou Onana rather than a Yannick Bolasie or a Cenk Tosun. Cenk Tosun's always the one they use. Whenever you speak to them about why didn't you sign a player late in January, and they think, oh, we didn't want to do a Cenk Tosun. It's like doing a Cenk Tosun has become an Everton. It's almost like he is the case study for what we don't want moving forward.
If you said to me before this podcast, what would doing a Cenk Tosun be? It'd be shaving my head and spraying hair back on.
Well, I know. But even like doing a Cenk Tosun, it should be like, in his case, if we're talking about hair, it should be doing a Rob Holding, shouldn't it?
I mean,
Rob Holding's had the most amazing hair recovery I've ever seen.
Maybe that's what we need to do. Yeah, they've probably got a picture of Cenk on one whiteboard and a picture of Rob Holding on the other, and it's like our recruitment needs to go from that to that.
If you're gonna fail, then at least fail like Rob Holding's style. Might as well look good doing it. But like we had like what appeared to be like a few pubes that had been like glued onto the top of his head.
All he does now is just sit on the bench, watch the best team in the land, and look boss, combing his hair. Like, what a life.
And Tosun as well. Tosun just comes on for Besiktas and like bags 2 or 3 because they're just swatting everybody offside 5 or 6-0.
There we go.
Good finisher, but he's got a decent life as well.
I wondered if they put an inquiry in for him in those desperate last few minutes at the deadline day. Do you fancy coming back, Cenk? We're 2 or 3 strikers down here.
He'll take him over Lucas Yao, by the way. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know how we ended up there, but yeah, really interesting stuff. And just like for a basic point of view as well, and for people out there, I mean, either of you can answer this in the sense of there's obviously the director of football and the head of recruitment, and I'm sure there'll be people going, well, isn't that Kevin Thelwell's job? I mean, Mick, you're shaking your head there. Kevin Farwell's more of a wider umbrella, would you say, compared to what Paddy's going to be doing?
Yeah, well, I think Paddy kind of hinted at it in that, people kind of suggesting that Kevin Felwell had been, taking a month off in January. And
I mean,
that is,
I've made that joke a few times, Kevin, if you're listening.
Your fault.
I know Paddy sort of acting like his agent's a little bit there at the start.
I know, yeah.
But I am sorry, Kevin. It's all in jest. I know you've been working really hard.
I just think there's a lot more to it as as a director of football. And to be honest, I think I don't think football itself does a brilliant job of describing what the role is. And I think then there's so many different titles of it at different football clubs. You have director of football, you have technical directors, and then you have football clubs who have director of footballs and technical directors. So I don't. Obviously, his remit isn't just recruitment. Otherwise, there'd be no such thing or no need for a head of recruitment. I think Paddy kind of hinted at really what his main prerogative is, and that's trying to create a sustainable version of Everton, and that obviously lies massively on the academy and then signing players or influencing the people at the top to sign players like Amadou Onana. Obviously, really, what you want is a duo who work in tandem. I think the best example is Brighton, in that they are so aligned from every single role, and that you can take out important people, and like the director of football, Dan Ashworth, and then promote David Weir, and it not really matter that much, because the real instigators of what the philosophy is at football club are the owner and the CEO. They are the most important people at the football club, really, irrespective of who the director of football is. And I think what Kevin Felwell and Marcel Brands and Steve Walsh's issue has been is that they're trying to set a culture, and I don't really think it's their job to set the culture. It's their job to implement it, but they've got to be told this is what the culture needs to be. Do you think you yourself aligns this culture? If the answer is yeah, then you start doing it for me. Whereas I think it's almost like Machiri's gone, yeah, you go do what you want to do, and you could do that for 9 out of 12 months, and every now and then I'll pop my head in and suggest someone like Lucas João.
It's mad, isn't it? I think like Mick says, the owner's got to be fully on board with the vision, and if he isn't or she isn't, then it does start to fall down, and that obviously is where Everton have gone wrong. I think Thelwell's got 6 or 7 departments under him. And I think the best way it's being described to me is, you imagine him as a director of football, the centre of a diagram, and loads of different spokes going out. And you've got recruitment being one, sports science being another, medical being another, academy, women's team, all the footballing departments at the club effectively report into the director of football. So his influence is much on bringing in Jack Naylor as the new head of sports science, or a new conditioning coach, and kind of James Vaughan as loan pathways, development being another one, obviously, as it is on recruitment. I think what we fail to understand, or in the English game in particular, because it's a newer concept here than elsewhere, is that a director of football is not a head of recruitment. He's not a transfer guru. He'll probably be one of the final steps of the process. If you go in for kudos, your scouts watch him X amount of times. Your senior scouts then watch him. Your head of recruitment, Dan Purdy, will go and watch them. Then Kevin Thelwell might do it. So he's in charge of an awful lot at the football club. You just need others to be on board with the vision, happy with it, keen to adhere to it, not throwing in, for example, a Philippe Coutinho if you want to sign young and hungry players. Not throwing in a 29-year-old journeyman from Reading with a worse goal-scoring record than Ellis Sims this season.
Everyone's really hung up on Lucas João, aren't they?
Honestly, I try to be as balanced as possible, but if Everton had lost Lucas João, I would have lost my shit. I genuinely would have lost my shit. I wouldn't have even. I don't know what it'd have written. It would have been quite funny, but I would have been angry, because I was angry even looking at the links.
Was that ever an actual option for them?
I think he was suggested to them,
right,
by certain figures in the footballing world.
Who may have also had a link to Reading.
Which, yeah, potentially, which kind of concerned me a little. Because you never know what the final decision is going to be at the end of that process. But thankfully, it was a hard no. And we don't have a 29-year-old journeyman striker back over the summer on Everton's books.
Maybe we should just get Rondon. He's not River Plate, isn't he?
I'd have Rondon than Lucas Shaw.
Yeah. Well, Dyche definitely wouldn't have got rid of Rondon, as I said last week, I don't think. But that was really fascinating stuff on that. Finally, we'll wrap it up very quickly. Derby, it feels ages away still, doesn't it, being a Monday night, and we're only on Thursday. Dominic Calvert-Lewin seemingly touch and go. Dyche was very cautious what he said about him for this game. They've got a few lads back by the looks of it, and Jota and Van Dijk, I think, have been in training for Liverpool today. But I mean, whether they're ready to play, I don't know. Mick obviously joking at the start of the show that we're going to go there and swap them aside. But what we'll say is that I've had a few Reds crying it in for the first time in years this week when I've been speaking to them, saying, "Oh, you're definitely gonna come and beat us," and they've not had that for a while. And it just feels like one of those games where if we go there and we just stay in the game for an hour, then it could get really nervous and it could get a little bit anxious for them, because it feels like they're, if not in a full-blown crisis, very much on the edge of one.
Yeah, I mean, talking about crying it in, I think it was TalkSport last week. You were having a discussion about which club is in a worse state, Everton or Liverpool, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing, to be honest. I mean, I'd snap your arms off on ninth or wherever they are. I mean, how much money have they spent? Well, you know, we spent a lot of money, but Christ, some of their fans who think they're not a well-run football club. Jesus. But I mean, in terms of the actual game, no, I think I said to you just before we came on, I'm actually a little bit more confident than this specific fixture than I am Leeds and Villa next, just because I think it kind of suits. Well, I mean, listen, you know, if we go out and put into action the same type of game plan that we did on Saturday, that there's an opportunity. I suppose the one negative is that Sean Dyche won't be able to, you know, slip, you know, a bit of money to the ground staff to try and dry out the pitch. But I mean, unless they're Evertonians, which I highly doubt. But I'm kind of confident. I don't know whether that's because I'm going and I've just got a feeling, just got a hunch that we might do something. But yeah, I think a lot of it will go into the performance, you know, in terms of how good the performance is. I think, you know, Dyche has mentioned that a few times, and that he's more focused on performances than results, or the league table anyway, which I like to hear. You know, and to be honest, I think there's been a couple of occasions in the last couple of years, you know, I think that the first Marco Silva derby there, and the Ancelotti one, and maybe even the Sam Allardyce one as well. We've actually not performed.
So I was going to say, even last year, I know we lost 2-0, but like, we were in the game for an hour, and we could, you know, Gordon could have easily had a penalty, couldn't they? At that point, they could have had a couple of lads sent off.
And I think, listen, I think if we kind of go in with that same attitude and just keep it tight and stay in the game. And I think one of the big assets that we probably didn't have last year is that we now, I mean, I know we're only going off one game, but I think it's a big asset that Sean Dyche coaching staff has anyway, and that, you know, you keep it tight and you win a corner and you try and nick something. Obviously, there's a big question mark whether Calvert-Lewin will be available or not. I'm really undecided on whether it's touch and go, whether we should risk him or not, considering that, you know, the relegation's not going to be prevented if we win or lose in this game, but him being fit will affect the rest of the season. Then it's tough, but I'm quietly confident. But at the same time, you know, on Monday morning, all that confidence will be gone.
I think I'm in the same boat, Paddy. You know, I think when I see that team she's on Monday, if Dom's playing, I really fancy our chances of not getting beat. If he's not playing, then I feel like it'll be really tough, just based on, listen, Mope will try and, you know, run into the channels and whatever. But if we're going to play direct footy and he's our point man, it feels like it could be a tough one for us to just get out and get a bit of breathing room.
Yeah, we've already said, haven't we, that Mope is not really suited to the role, not in that particular role. So it would change things quite a lot from an Everton perspective. I just let's see how it goes with Calvert-Lewin. Like Mick, I agree. Probably not worth risking him if he's not 100% fit. His fitness is more important than 3 points in a Merseyside derby. But I think it's just otherwise it's same again, isn't it? probably same midfield, same approach. What you do for Liverpool away is probably pretty similar to what you do for this Arsenal side at home right now. Focus on all those things, just substitute out Saka and the approach to Saka when you're dealing with Mohamed Salah coming off the right wing. You're going to need your wide midfielders to get close to the fullbacks and support them to block off the inside. Part of the game plan that impressed me most was how they stymied Odegaard's influence on Saturday. So we'll be doing the same to a Thiago-like figure in Liverpool's midfield, and just got to see how it goes. I think at this stage, it's about Dyche getting his methods across, picking up points where possible, and obviously a lot of points left to fight for. So however it goes on Monday, it's not going to decide the season. You just need to kind of keep going and keep working. And I think even a point on Monday night, I'd kind of gleefully accept that right now.
Oh God, I probably would have taken a point before Arsenal, Liverpool from both games if someone had said to me beforehand. So, not going to say 3-8 because it is a Merseyside derby, but yeah, why not go there and do something? They are pretty awful at the moment, so let's see. Cheers, lads. A nice one to Paddy, nice one to Mick. That has been your weekly show. We'll have loads of build up to the derby in the coming days. See if we can get Mick to record something from the away end when we win 1-0 as well. With jubilant fans behind him. But we'll see all about that. But that has been your weekly show. Cheers for tuning in. Up the Toffees.